Hi, everybody. I am here today with the amazing Brad Olsen. Brad Olsen, how are you?
Hey there, Elena. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And we've had so many incredible discussions off camera. It's nice to share a discussion with your followers and listeners here.
Yeah, I thought, I would share with my audience the amazing knowledge you have gathered through the years, not only going back and forth to Antarctica, but to other places. You are an explorer of the extreme, I would say, and an explorer and researcher of ancient civilizations, of traces on Earth of ancient civilizations, of our hidden past, our hidden history. And you've written many books. I have one here, Beyond Esoteric. Wrote many others. We put a link to your website. You're a publisher as well. You organize events. You're doing all the conferences. Everybody wants you to talk to their conferences. You're trending. Brad is trending.
Well, it's nice to be loved, better than
Yes.
despised. So, yeah,
Love. Yeah. Go on.
I
Go on.
enjoy just sharing my information and helping people understand some of the places I went to, including Antarctica 5 years ago. I was still on the boat, just getting ready to sail back across the Drake Passage. And it was an incredible trip. I still think about it all the time. So many little details, and the landscape is just so unlike anything we know in the rest of the world. It's quite an enigma. And I suppose that's why there's so much curiosity, but also mystery and rumors, and how it's supposed to be the ice wall to the flat earth, and even legends and folklore about
Yeah.
what is really down there.
But what in the first place in, inspired you to go there? What was the reason? What the spark?
Really just curiosity. I'd been to all other six continents, so had to round it out and make it to my seventh continent. And I was already down in southern South America, and got to a town called Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city of the world, with my partner at the time. And she wanted to go real bad. So we inquired around, but we were there around Christmas and then New Year's. And all the travel agents said, "Oh, no, we're booked up until February. Come back in 2 months." I said, "No, no, we gotta fly out in 2 months." So finally befriended a travel agent who said, "Well, if you're interested in going by a sailboat, go to the other pier, because the main pier is where all the big ships come in, including the cruise ships." So we went to the other pier and just asked around, and sure enough, found a boat that had room for two people. And we had to pay for the trip in cash, which you'd think, okay, I got it in my bank account. That should be okay. But in Argentina, they only let you withdraw about $100 a day. So every
Yeah.
day until the trip left, we had to go do withdrawals and collect the money. And it's like you push a big pile of cash over to the captain, and he said, "All right, you're on." And then we were off on this wonderful trip.
And then from there, you decide to go to Antarctica.
So we were on a sailboat, a Polish vessel from Gdansk, Poland, with 11 Poles and 3 Americans. And we set sail in middle January and went through the Beagle Passage, where Charles Darwin went, named after his ship, the Beagle. And then it was great. We're thinking, oh, this is what a wonderful first day on the Beagle, very calm seas. There were dolphins jumping next to the boat. We saw penguins swimming by. We thought, oh, this is going to be great. Then we turned on the Drake Passage, and the seas got really rough. And dinner came up that way. And it was basically a very rough passage going over. For 3 days, I was confined to my bunk bed and throwing up. I think I lost 25 pounds on that trip. But then finally, when started feeling better, could go up on deck and help with the watch because we had to keep a lookout for icebergs. In fact, that was the first thing we saw, just giant icebergs that broke off from the ice shelves. And then finally, we dropped anchor on King George Island, and there was a Polish base there called Arktowski, and they let us come ashore. We brought them fresh fruit and vegetables. They let us take a shower and use the internet so we could tell people we made it and have a meal with them. And that's when they, one night, we're all playing musical instruments and hanging out, and they brought out an ice bowl of blue ice, a very old ice from the glacier. I thought, oh, that's kind of nice, interesting. Drink some blue ice. They put it in our drink, put some fluid in there, and it started popping like popcorn. Pop, 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 pop. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Wow.
So we thought that was pretty cool, and we started doing it ourselves. We'd take our dinghy up to an iceberg and chip, 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 get our own blue ice for drinks.
Wow. And
So it's just little things like that which made the trip really memorable.
yeah, and the feeling of being far from everything, I suppose. Like
Mm.
maybe you got a feeling of like being on another planet, I suppose.
Oh, it very much like another planet. That's a great description because everything's frozen there. There's no trees, there's no grass, there's no bushes, no land animals. All the life is really below the ocean, except for when the mammals like penguins, well, the birds like penguins come ashore, or the seals come ashore to feed on the penguins. The leopard seals eat the penguins. Everything else is in the marine environment. And the whales are quite abundant. They swam under our boat one time, and I captured it with my phone. I was the only one with all these professional photographers, and they said, "Oh, did you get it?" I was like, "Yeah, I got it." I showed that in my presentation, how cool that was. And it was just like that. Every day was a new adventure. But Elena, like you, I'm a researcher and I'm very interested in these subjects that we hear about going on down there. So, as far
Yeah.
as I know, I'm the only one who's been down there with the sole intent purpose of looking into a lot of these mysteries. And what I found was what I wasn't really looking for. What I was looking for, I didn't really find. And that is every research station we went to, I'd ask the same questions. Have you heard about any advanced civilization or pyramids poking through the ice or big ships that have been trapped here or holes under the ice that you could fly an airplane into? Routinely, the answer was no. But that's not to say they knew anything or were hiding it. It's just they didn't know. But we were in a part of Antarctica, just right here on the very tip of the Palmer Peninsula. And so it was a kind of a limited area where we could investigate these things. And what I did find out is that there is a big no-fly zone over a portion of the South Pole. That's kind of curious because, excuse me, who's flying to the South Pole? Not that many people. So why do you need a no-fly zone? Well, that is the location where Admiral Byrd said he spotted the hole in the ice, as well as several other whistleblowers who had information on this giant hole in the ice, which 2 miles up at the South Pole, you could say it's an entrance to inner Earth. It's certainly a passage down to the continental level. So I've been very interested in that piece of information. Plus, um, we did find out that one of the other research stations had a UFO sighting. It was an Argentinian base, and they were very reluctant to tell us, even though they could speak English. One of them says, "No, no, no, we're not allowed to talk about that." So that just piqued my curiosity. I said, "No, you got to tell us." So the other one left, and finally, after about 20 minutes, badgering the guy, he finally says, yeah, there was another one of our bases called Belgrano 2 that had a UFO sighting just a week or two prior. So it's interesting that you get these eyewitness testimony and these other uh, corroborating evidence for this hole in the ice. And this is where Admiral Byrd wrote in his diary that he discovered it as the first aviator to fly over the South Pole, spotted it, and then came back during Operation High Jump. It would appear he was summoned to come back with only a radio man, and they put their plane down into the hole and flew to this inner Earth sanctuary, which was called the Domain of the Ariani. And there he was lost control of his plane, was escorted by two UFOs, which they called a Flugelrad, and it had a Nazi Germany insignia on the UFO craft. And they told him, "You're in good hands. We're going to land you in 10 minutes in this crystalline city that they called the Domain." And then Admiral Byrd was summoned to go meet the master in this town, in this city. And it was there that he was told, we're very concerned that the United States has developed nuclear warheads, just recently dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Please take this information back to your superiors and tell them you shouldn't have these weapons. They're very dangerous. And even though you might try to use them for energy, we think you shouldn't have them, and please get rid of them. And so he took that information with him, but he had to fly back to base. And there was 3 hours of missing time from Little America, which was tracking his flight. He got back to Little America, and then they were, as a military man does, takes his orders to go to the portion of Antarctica where the Nazi bases were, a place called New Schwabenland, particularly base 211. And then the Battle of High Jump commenced. It was a very one-sided battle, and let's just say Admiral Byrd and the Armada had their ass handed to them, and they were out of there 2 months into the 6-month expedition. And when he was on his way back, he said, "I don't want to be alarming, but we'll have to confront an enemy that has the ability to fly pole to pole at incredible speeds." And so now most researchers will look at the incident over the Capitol in 1952. Those are not UFOs. Those are the Honeyboo craft of the Third Reich, which is now the Fourth Reich, the Antarctica Nazis, who took all their best material to South America. And that's what confronted Byrd's Armada in the Battle of High Jump.
Yeah, there are many whistleblowers who have brought up this information about the Fourth Reich having bases in Antarctica. There's a lot of historical evidences. And I'd like to bring an information that Dr. Michael Sala and myself received from an employee of McMurdo in June 2021. I related it in this book. His name was Frank. He was an employee, and Michael Sala has all his papers, his passport, copy of his passport, his contract for work contract. He is vetted. I mean, that was a real person with a real job at McMurdo. And this person contacted us to tell us, wow, that's really weird. There's a lot of American Marines who have just arrived, American soldiers, and they're just rushing towards the South Pole. And nobody would talk to us. They're quite aggressive. They wouldn't talk to anyone. They're just arriving at McMurdo and going there. And a little bit later, a month or two later, he contacted us and he said, oh my gosh, there's an exodus of German-speaking people coming from the South Pole. they do not want to talk to anyone here, but it's a real exodus, and they are leaving by boat at McMurdo for Argentina, South Argentina. We said Argentina. And so he said that was this really weird. And then he said, oh, now Chinese and Turks are rushing to go to the South Pole to take lands. It's really weird. And then a few months later, he says, that's decided. I am with a group of friends here. I'm going to organize a little trip to the South Pole. We're not allowed to. We've really been told we're not allowed to go there, but we're going to try it. I didn't have a news for a while, and the last news I had from him, an email, he said, I met an alien. It was life-changing. I can't talk about it now. Well, then after he was called back to the state, and he disappeared. Circumstances, anyway, it was a trap. I have to say, I'm going to tell it here because it's important. He was there. He tells me, I've seen an alien. It was life-changing. So he was back from the South Pole to McMurdo. And then he sends an email saying, my mother is, I received a phone call. I need to go in emergency, go back to the States. My mother has had a heart attack and she's in hospital, and the doctor said she's going to die. So he flew in emergency to America, and he wrote me back. He said, I'm pissed off. My mother is fine. She never had a heart attack. She was in the hospital, but she never had a heart attack. And so I brought her home and she's fine. So I'm considering now going back to work to McMurdo. And that was the last time I heard from him. Shortly after, Frank disappeared from social medias. All his accounts, everything was deleted. As if he had never existed. He has disappeared. And with Michael Sala, we investigated. He's gone. Someone wants to shut him up. So I want to bring that up. What do you think? What would you think so, Brad? Is there something really extraordinary at the South Pole? You confirm?
Something very extraordinary. As I said, you have the no-fly zone, which is very unusual to put it over the one section where the presumed hole is. One of Linda Moulton Howe's whistleblowers named Brian S. reported on doing an emergency flight and defying the no-fly zone and flew over it, and that's when he saw the hole. So it's to disguise where this giant gaping hole is in the ice. And there's known other holes all over the place. It should come as no surprise because Antarctica is a very volcanically active continent. In fact, it's the most volcanoes on any continent in the world, 91 active volcanoes. So with all this geothermal activity, it can heat up below the surface and create these giant caverns and sometimes chimneys to release the heat through the ice. And just recently, Elena, in the last week, Iran, arch enemy to America and Israel, Iran, of all countries, says, oh, we're going to set up a base in Antarctica. We're going to set it up at the South Pole. Interesting choice of locations. So maybe they want to force this disclosure. And isn't it interesting that exodus of German-speaking military men came from the South Pole to McMurdo? McMurdo also has a building, a nondescript building that is run by the NSA. And they're also present up at the South Pole Amundsen Scott Station. So the NSA, which was the joke name was no such agency because they wouldn't even admit their existence till the 1980s. They were developed in the 1940s, right after the Roswell crash, to deal with anything extraterrestrial. They would be the ones who would go to a crash site, retrieve the artifacts, including living or dead alien bodies, to backward engineer or to interrogate if they caught them alive. So it's interesting that the NSA would be present at the South Pole to protect the hole. One thing that Brian S. said, and there was also a Russian whistleblower who described the hole as being about a half mile or almost a mile across, big enough to put a plane in, fly a plane directly into the hole. But Brian S. said there's also a road that goes into it. Like you could take a Arctic cat, so you could drive in, and the road just kind of corkscrews down and around. So there are a couple different ways to go down in there. And then if we're to follow what Admiral Byrd wrote it in his diary that his son published after his death, because after Admiral Byrd came back, especially after making that comment about flying pole to pole at incredible speeds, he went into quarantine. He was read the riot act by the military, and for the rest of his life, he could only speak very encoded ways. So, for example, the Long Jeans watch interview in black and white. He's on the interview, and Admiral Byrd was asked a question: "What could young Americans explore?" He said, "Well, the Arctic region's getting pretty crowded, but you can go down to the South Pole and go beyond the pole." And that's very cryptic. What do you see beyond the pole in any direction? It's just this big polar plateau. But I think what he was saying is the new area to explore beyond the pole would be in this ice hole and this whole world, this inner earth down below. Because again, with geothermal activity, you have the propensity of different forms of life. And what he wrote about in his diary was even a verdant green valley, with what he said he saw a woolly mammoth living down there. So megaflora and megafauna existing in the domain of the Ariani. And so we've heard for many, many years, Elena, that Antarctica could be where disclosure happens. And maybe Iran setting up their base at the South Pole would help facilitate that disclosure.
It's interesting what you say, because in one of his recent messages, Thorhan, my contact in the Galactic Federation, said that disclosure would come from Middle East. Information would come from Middle East. So that's very interesting. So there's a fascinating link that we can make between these Ariani inner Earth people and the German, the Fourth Reich, because Admiral Byrd, as you described, was escorted by Honebu flying saucers. So the Germans had found these inner Earth people, of course. But do you think, because the name Ariani, the Nazis were obsessed by finding Aryan genetics to get technology to work, I suppose. What would you have to say about that? Is your view on that, your opinion?
Yeah, and the words are so similar, you can't just
Mhm.
dismiss it outright.
No.
Well, we got a whole bunch of their scientists after World War II to come to America under Project Paperclip, including Werner von Braun and another scientist named Hermann Oberth. And when asked, how did Germany become so advanced so quickly? He said, well, we had help from our friends from above. And of course, they were very, very interested in looking at all the artifacts as well as inner earth in Tibet. There were exploratory parties that were going there to try to find any way, any technology, any advantage to give the German army, because they knew they were outnumbered. So they had to have better soldiers, better equipment, and better technology if they were going to win the Second World War. And they just couldn't do it in time. Maybe if they had 6 more months, they were already in the beginning stages of testing nuclear warheads. In fact, many of those scientists came over to America and started the Manhattan Project, which was our nuclear weapon technology. And so maybe that's why the Ariani were very concerned, because both sides were going to use this in a warfare setting. But yeah, good observation that Ariani, the Aryan race, and the Aryan race was from originally from Central Asia, where they were looking for Shangri-La and Agartha, these other underworld advanced civilizations that would help them advance the cause of the Third Reich, and in this case, the Fourth Reich. So they had to leave the German homeland, but they left with all their material and wealth. And they also set up micronations in Germany, or outside of Germany, but also uh, in Argentina and Chile and Brazil. And so when I was going down there 5 years ago, I'm looking at all these maps, and I'm finding that there's these huge land area tracts that are owned by German speaking people.
Yeah.
And they're basically their own micronations. So they're able to operate outside the purview of the host nation. And they're big, they're huge. They're the size of some of our small states like Connecticut or Delaware or Rhode Island, in Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. And that's where they also were continuing the development of the honeyboo and the real technology. And I visited one of those places in a very Germanic area near Cordoba, Argentina, up in the hills of a very small mountain range in the center of Argentina, and went to the Eden Hotel in La Falda. And I tell you, Elena, I've been to Germany many times. It was just like, hey, I'm back in Germany. Want to get some strudel or some Wiener Schnitzel for lunch? And it's a very wealthy area too. So just a half a day drive along this mountain range, there was a very famous UFO site. It's even in the Lonely Planet book. We're reading, oh, let's go there and do a night watch. So we did, but we didn't see anything. But I get back to the United States, and I'm telling my friend David Hatcher Childress, he's one of the stars on Ancient Aliens. He says, "Oh, Brad, that those weren't UFOs. They don't, you have real UFOs don't leave burn marks in the grass. They don't outright abduct people." So those were the German crafts that were coming out of that mountain. That was one of their micronations and underground bases there. So it extends also to South America too.
Yeah, that's impressive. And these that's interesting to make also the link with the Adamski files. You know, George Adamski had been contacted by alleged extraterrestrials who were coming from Venus, but the craft, Space Brothers, and the craft was a Honeyboo, and the guy's name was Orton, and he was speaking High German. I mean that, you know. So they often we had these cases where Germans dress up or as extraterrestrial to say, hey, if you see the Honeyboo, it's not Honeyboo, it's not German, it's ETs, okay, right? And
Right.
there's actually a CIA director, I don't remember who he was. He said that the best person who helped them hiding all these Nazi things was Adamski. So, you know, that was interesting. So, and it's interesting that the Honeyboo, as you described, escorted Admiral Byrd to the Ariane, pretending it was the Ariane ships, you know, because they had made contact. It was very interesting.
Yeah, and it even had he was very um specific in noting that the Honeyboo craft had the insignia. See the iron cross in the middle of the craft. And so, of course, this is just in the year following World War II. He was obviously very concerned. This is the enemy craft. We're in a faraway land. But at that point, they just wanted him to pass on a message that they should be left alone in peace. Well, after the high jump, which was about a month later, and Admiral Byrd had to go back, the U.S. and the allied nations that were defeated very much wanted revenge. And so, fast forward to the Operation Argus, which was in the late 1950s when the US was doing high altitude nuclear bomb testing. This is the cover story. It's still a classified top secret operation, but they had to go right offshore of New Schwabenland to do these tests. And that's kind of interesting. Why do you have to go all the way down there unless you're perhaps getting revenge and nuking that base? It's called Base 211. I do believe that the domain of the Ariane was what they called the New Berlin base, which was a whole city, where Base 211 was more of a military base on the coast. And that's where the Battle of High Jump took place. We first came in there to bomb some of the outbuildings, and then the Hanibu came up out of the ocean to confront Admiral Byrd and his ships, sinking one of them, just one of them. They could have taken out the whole fleet, but they wanted to send him back with a very potent message that we're not to be messed with. So then they come back about a decade later and then nuke the place. But this has never been reported. And if I were ever to go back to Antarctica, Elena, I would like to go back with some Geiger counters to around the area of New Schwabenland, but more specifically, the Schumacher Hills. So this was named after a German aviator who landed a seaplane in the Schumacher Ponds, which are these geothermal lakes that never freeze down in Antarctica because they're heated from volcanic activity. And then his men went out and found where the base was going to be located in the late 1930s along an under ice river that they could also get U-boats into this location. So if we nuke that area, there could still be some residual radiation. If that were to turn up, then that would really confirm that Operation Argus was all about nuking the Antarctic German base. And it's interesting that just in the following year, the new treaty for Antarctica, the Antarctica Treaty, was ratified in 1958. And one of the clauses said there would be no nuclear bomb testing or activity down there. Now, that's kind of interesting. Why would you have to be that specific unless it already occurred?
Yeah.
To say it's not going to be allowed to happen ever again. So I take that to mean that they did nuke the base, exacting revenge. But as I understand the history of the German base down there, in that time, they were already moving their operations to these micronations in South America that it was either abandoned at that point or very few people had lived there in 1958. So it didn't really do them much damage. They didn't like being down there. It's very isolated. And every time a U-boat would come with new supplies, if one person on the U-boat had a cold, like I have today, everybody would get infected and get sick because no microbes can live in that cold environment. So it's very sterile. And so if people, one person got sick, then everybody would get sick. So they were just getting tired of being down there, and they knew that they could move their operation to some of these micronations in South America. And that's what they did, existing to this very day. So when I was down there 5 years ago, a big news story was, I think it was in Paraguay, somebody had died and they're going through the person's belongings and went down into a basement and found hundreds of artifacts from Nazi Germany,
Wow.
like museum quality. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of enthusiasm for this form of fascism down in South America, and I think it existed to this day.
Well, yes. Yeah. It's interesting as well. You know, that stays in the back of my mind. Were the Aryani genuine inner Earth people, or were they Germans who had developed this civilization, uh, breakaway civilization, benefiting of extraterrestrial technology, um, passing themselves, pretending being inner Earth or ETs living in inner Earth, not to reveal to Bird that they were Germans because they spoke to him in German. They had honeyboos. You know,
Yeah.
the because of the Adamski affair, I'm led to think about that. You know, that the Aryan in fact were Germans. But that's my speculation. What do you think?
Well, certainly the two pilots who escorted Bird's plane in, he even said that they had Nordic or Germanic accents. Of course, their Flugelrod ship had insignias that he said were of Germany. And those pilots that also escorted him out um, said at the end, when he was flying out of the hole, they said, Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye in German. So they even spoke to him in German. But when he went to meet the master, he felt that the master was telepathic and very advanced.
Ah,
So the
so
master could have been either hybrid or, yeah, and they
yeah,
had just allowed the Germans to settle in the domain and call it New Berlin base. But it's interesting that they would have had that parallel of the Ariani with the Aryans and felt that they could co-inhabit this area.
yeah, maybe the German called them the Ariani because I don't know, they were tall, blonde, I don't know. But your view on things, it makes really a lot of sense that they would have these inner Earth people would have welcomed the German to settle with them. So this is a place in the South Pole where you have this amazing fact and technology, and a lot of technology, but also revealing what's down there. If someday this information comes more officially to mainstream media, that would mean that it would be revealed that the Germans had a base there, that they would be in contact with ETs because they would have ET technology, and all the Dark Fleet Fourth Reich would blow up, and then paperclip, the infiltration of Nazi scientists into America, everything would blow up. So I think, but the way I'm seeing things, that there is a will to put a lead on that, and probably the NSA or other organizations. But have you sensed that there is a deliberate war to keep this information non-existent?
Oh, absolutely. And they send their agents out to attack people like you and me to discredit our information and to try to hush us up or make us look like we're conspiracy theorists or we don't know what we're talking about. This whole discussion never happened because there's no evidence. How are you going to prove what you just said? Right. But you and I are researchers. What we do is we put together information, we connect the dots, we collect data points to come to the conclusions that we're speaking about today. But these misinformation agents will come in there and intentionally muddy the water, attack the messenger, and try to keep us off the track, and keep all this uh, just put fear, uncertainty, and doubt into everything we have to say. And we don't even have to mention the person who we both had a run-in with, but they'll do this in a way to try to distract the story from emerging. And I think the story here is the hole in the ice near the South Pole. It's probably why the Americans put their base there in the first place, to control that in and out flow, to watch who's coming and going, and to control the narrative about what it's all about. Put this no-fly zone over it. So even if the very remote possibility of a plane coming through the area, that they would have to land at the South Pole Station and not go over this no-fly zone. So out of sight is out of mind. And how would any workers who are just workers at the South Pole base even know about it? So that's what this one person who attacked both of us says. Well, I lived there for a year and I would have known. No, you wouldn't have.
No.
Look, if there was a HARP array 20 miles over the mountain range from where I'm at, and nobody told me, does that mean it doesn't exist? No, it's a top secret installation. Of course, they're not going to tell you. So these people are out there to just try to discredit anyone on the trail of finding out what's really going on in Antarctica. And it's too bad, because I think they're just misguided. And, you can pay anybody anything to say anything you want them to say, and attack anyone you want. But it's just a shame that we have to deal with people like this in the world.
Yeah, but truth always comes out. But the fact that these agents put so much dedication and aggressivity in trying to discredit anyone who brings the truth about Antarctica reveals that there is a deliberate fright, the campaign that's generated by fright over this information, because this is ridiculous. I mean, the level of aggressivity of these attacks, personal attacks on anyone who brings information about this Antarctica hole, it's ridiculous. It shows that there is an information that some organizations don't want the world to know, because it would be the downfall of them. Because imagine, it would be like snowball effect. So it does the contrary. In fact, it brings the people's attention on, oh, what's really down there then. I know Linda Moulton Howe as well has been attacked because she brought this testimony of this guy. I mean, yeah, it's incredible.
And even our dear friend Dan Willis, who's
Yes.
probably the kindest and most gentle man you'd ever want to meet, he got attacked by this guy. And so did Dr. Michael Sala, who we
Yeah.
both know is just a very honest broker of the truth. And like you and I, just trying to get to the bottom of things. Well, does it help to attack us? Maybe in his mind it does. But he
Yes.
just shows us his true colors, and
Yes.
we'll just relegate him to the trash bin of disinformationists.
Oh yes, oh yes, absolutely. This truth is rising. The truth is rising. So there's nothing that can stop it. These people just bring attention on the truth, on information. Then. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It's like something boiling, a knowledge, a truth boiling, and it's about to boom.
Nothing can stop it.
They
And
can't
just like
stop.
so many other findings are coming out, other archaeological sites. You and I were speaking at the GSIC conference last October, and I was telling you about a new project, which I'm going to make a book out of as well, and a conference presentation about underwater archaeology.
Yes, let's
And you
talk
and
about
I,
that.
yeah, well, you and I were speaking about the Baltic Sea anomaly,
Yes.
which is one of the most telltale UFO crashes, but it's underwater. It even shows the skid mark where this Millennium Falcon like craft crashed. But when researchers have gone down there with the mini sub and looked at it closely, it turned to stone. And you brought up a very interesting point, that when wood, like in petrified wood forests, is exposed to pressure and water and weight over time, wood turns to stone. Organic material turns to stone. And
Yes.
what we've learned a lot from UFO crafts is that they're very organic in nature. and can actually communicate with the pilots through the skin. The skin of a UFO is very soft, it's very organic. It becomes part of the pilot itself. So that was really interesting information, Elena, and I'll definitely have to quote you in the book when I put it in. Oh, there you go.
I had the opportunity to touch the skin of a ship once. And
Wow.
I was it's in this one. I was explained that the material is made of. It's not only simply organic. It's organic. It's an organic technology, an organic material, but that is fabricated, and it's animated with, imbued with consciousness, either organic consciousness or either AI. But it's alive, and it's made of organic material. So the ship is like a pet, in fact, and it's a living being most of the time. And when you spoke to me at the last JSIC about your interest in this, I said, yeah, but that's not a problem. It's stone petrified ship because it was organic at the start, so it makes sense. And you went like, oh my God, yes. And I'm really looking forward to hear more about your research on that um, um, underwater archaeology.
Well, after we did our talk, and I was thinking how I'm going to break this up into chapters in the book, it occurred to me that a lot of these underwater archaeological sites, they're aged much differently. And in fact, the Baltic Sea anomaly would be one of the oldest because, of course, the Baltic Sea would have had to been above water when the crash skidded down into its current position, which is now deep underwater in the Baltic Sea, which is basically between Sweden and Lithuania, up in that area. Very cold water. That could only have really happened a very long time ago. So I think this one is one of the oldest underwater sites. I would even place it back to the time of Hyperborea, the original high tech civilization here on Earth. So that'll be in the Hyperborea chapter. And then, of course, there'll be Lemurian underwater archaeology, such as Yonaguni off of the island in the southern archipelago of the Okinawa Islands of Japan, Atlantis underwater ruins, and then underwater archaeology of a modern age, such as Herculaneum and off of Egypt, and even some like Dongerland of the North Sea. So of the last ice age, which I would say is more modern than those other two.
Okay,
You're referencing something in one of your books.
yes, I was while you were talking, I was looking for that's the Baltic
Aha.
anomaly, Millennium Falcon, as they call it. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. Oh my gosh. So are you up for new exploration, new travel, new trips to these locations?
Well, absolutely. And I'm an advanced scuba diver, so I'd like to even go down and scuba dive some of them and check them out.
Wow,
We
wow.
were talking at one point with Danny Henderson about doing a GSIC in Japan. And I said, well, shoot, let's do a side trip and go down to Yonaguni and scuba dive that site. Check that out because it's not very deep underwater, but it's very much a megalithic site, discovered by an abalone diver just 20 years ago. Very newly discovered site. And for the longest time, National Geographic would deny that it was anything more than a natural formation. But if you look at how very technically carved it was with steps and perfect right angles and different levels, they finally admitted, Elena, that it had to have been fashioned by a higher intelligence. But what they didn't want to admit or bring to light was that the water levels must have been lower to be able to create a megalithic site. Because how do you create a megalithic site underwater? You can't do it. So it had to have been, yeah, during a period like Lemuria when land masses were higher and then sunk down during a pole shift or earth cataclysmic event. and sank some of these temples down to their current locations.
Yes, it would be very interesting to take a map of the world and regress it in time and see how when the water levels were lower in history, and see what land masses would be up and what civilization at that time could have developed in these areas. And so gives you a map by time periods. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Of course, you have Atlantis sites from a pyramid that was discovered off of the Azori Islands just in the last 10 years to many different locations in the Caribbean Sea, including one below, very, very deep below Cuba, between Cuba and the Yucatan, which is like a perfectly symmetrical Mayan city, including pyramids and a ceremonial court. And again, Mother Nature would never create anything so symmetrical, so perfect, so closely resembling a Mayan city that it has to be something that was fashioned by a higher intelligence a long, long time ago. That's what makes these underwater archaeology sites so fascinating, is because they're very, very old, some of the oldest sites we know of. And so other locations like the Bimini Roads, megalithic stones in a J-shaped formation. When this area was above water, it was like a pier, a dock that stuck out of the land, but now it's sunken underwater, and you can scuba dive down to it or snorkel it even. It's only about 20 or 30 feet above water. It kind of angles up towards the land too. So there's just dozens of these sites around the world, some of them even showing the grid formation of ancient cities, such as off of Gujarat, India, as well as Dongerland between Scandinavian Denmark and England, showing the grid of old towns that are now submerged. So it's really fascinating when you put it all together. And so much of our ancient history, as you know, has just been edited out, out of sight, out of mind. What you don't have to see here is not the story of humanity, and that's really a shame, because I think we deserve to know the truth of our true human origin and of these high tech civilizations that once existed here on Earth.
Yeah, yes, and you dedicated your life mission to this quest, bringing to the world the knowledge of these ancient civilization, bringing to the world the truth about our hidden history throughout archaeological exploration and research and travel. You know, I'm very much into traveling as well. I travel a lot to meet population, ethnic groups, to hear about their own legends, their own story, to bring, you know, the elements, the missing links to history. And you travel as well because there is no better way than going there. Once you're there, you have elements that you would never have in any books or documents. You really need to go, and you just go for it. You want to study something, you take a plane and you go there. And that's why I admire with you, you know, it's that's the right way to do things, in my opinion.
Well, that's so kind. And you do the same, Elena. And when you get to these locations, you can speak to the local people, and they'll often tell you the folklore, the backstory, and things you would never find just researching in a book. So traveling to these locations is very, very important. I've just come back from the country of Laos in Southeast Asia, and I went to investigate a location called the Plain of Jars, which is it's a megalithic site. There are multi-ton giant jars, some of them 3 meters tall, that you could put a body in. And they're scattered all over this high plateau in the country of Laos. And now it's a World Heritage site. So there's a museum there. And one of the legends was that they were created by giants and they were used as cups for giants. So this is the kind of thing that you really only discover when you go to these locations and talk to the people or visit the museum and see the sites themselves, because they often tell you the story. And one thing I like to do is find a location where I can be alone, just basically sit with myself and meditate at the location and just kind of quiet the mind and just let whatever information come through. And I'll tell you, I've come to some very profound realizations at these locations by doing that. And you could say, well, it's just my imagination, but
No,
it's also, hey,
no, it's a
it's
real
the
thing.
feeling of the site. Yeah.
It's called psychometry. I do this as well. When I go on a site, I just tune in, quiet my mind, tune in. I just sense the energy. I always do that with my hands to tune in with the electricity, electrostatic of the place. And you have images and memories of that comes to you, and you can bring elements. I went, for instance, to Karahan Tepe in eastern Turkey with friends archaeologists, and I could sense some history of the place, some images, and I told JJ, the lady that was with us, JJ Answorth. She was part of the travel, the trip, and
Oh
I
yeah, I know JJ.
JJ, she's great, and she
Yeah.
knows so much. And I said, "Hey, JJ," she was just there. She said, I said to her, "Hey, I see a ritual happening here," and I could see, and I told her what I was seeing, what the site was showing me, and she just jaw dropped. She went, "Oh my gosh, that's my research. I came across these conclusions, but I didn't speak to anyone." And she said, "Other psychics as well have told me the same thing." And things you could not make up if you not you need to go there, to the places. And psychometry is a real thing, and that's the right thing, and you put all the elements together, archaeology, psychometry, meeting the local population. That's, you cannot avoid this. You need to, because they will tell you old stories, and that's treasure.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. So, Brad, that's been really great chatting with you and catching up. And well, you keep us posted with your research on underwater archaeology. I really look forward to read this book, and we'll talk about it again, probably.
And
um,
everything and anything about Antarctica as well.
yes, 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 because Antarctica, something big is coming, and some organizations are putting shields to try to stop it, but there's so much that much you can do, and until truth just blows up. And yeah, yeah.
It's happening.
So Brad, where can people can find you? Social medias, website?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to check out my books, pick up a copy, signed copy, you can go to cccpublishing.com. You want to know more about me and the projects I'm working on and my upcoming conferences, you can go to bradolsen.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Other CCC Publishing or my name, Brad Olsen. So it was great talking to you today, Elena. Always interesting when an hour goes by as quickly as it does. It's engaging conversation.
It is, and it's always a pleasure, and a pleasure of the mind. This, oh my gosh, sharing information. Thank you so much, Brad, and
Oh, my pleasure.
thank you so much,
Do it
and
again sometime.
chat soon.